Statement. We now move on to the 10-minute rule motion, and I'll give a few moments for the House to settle.
I know, rushing out here is instead of what seems to be happy to say.
Thank you.
Very good.
Ten-minute rule motion, Alistair Strathern.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision for right to manage for freeholders on unadopted private or mixed-use housing estates, to set minimum standards for public amenities on new housing estates, to make provision about the enforcement of those standards, to make provision about the adoption by local authorities of public amenities on new housing estates, and for connected purposes. Or, in maybe less parliamentarily precise language, but maybe a bit more relatable for those watching along at home, to make sure we're finally tackling the freehold stealth tax that is affecting far too many new homeowners on new estates right across the country. Now, I'm incredibly proud to be here as part of a party that recognises, in some of the best traditions of this country, the importance of secure homes for people to build stable and prosperous lives. Indeed, as a Labour MP, I'm probably contractually obligated to remind the House that one of the defining missions of this Labour government, as part of its mission for growth, is to get Britain building again. Because when it comes to the state of the housing market that we've inherited, it's clear far too much simply isn't working for far too many people at the moment. Whether it's the broken state of the house supply system, pricing far too many people out of home ownership, whether it's the lack of affordable social rented homes or insecure private rented sector accommodation, creating precariousness for families that just shouldn't have to face that in their lives, or the broken leasehold system that we announced some really important measures to finally tackle yesterday that I know many members right across the House will have welcomed. Today, though, I want to address a slightly less appreciated issue, but no less important, and one that's really growing in the number of homeowners right across the country it's beginning to touch. And that is the rise of freehold housing estates. Now, freehold arises when homes aren't adopted by local authorities, leaving those new occupants exposed to a freehold stealth tax, paying money for services that others would receive as part of their council tax to a private management company, and on the hook for an estate management company looking after their estate that is often unaccountable to them and often seeks to exploit them with every available power they have. Now, I know from lots of conversations with other members across this House that I'm far from alone in experiencing this issue. It's a growing one in my constituency, but it's a growing one right across the country. Indeed, when I'm away on holiday, I can't escape it either. Over recess, I was up in Scotland visiting family, and a family friend there took me to one side to raise issues they've had, which is quite typical, I think. Their estate had gone unadopted now for many years. No end to adoption was in sight. And in the meantime, they were paying hundreds of pounds each year for basic services that all of the rest of their neighbours, all of the rest of their community would be receiving through their council tax. But that wasn't the worst of it. When they'd missed one bill, which had gone up, as it happens, quite considerably at a week's notice, rather than coming to them, rather than giving them tolerance to understand it, their estate management company used the contractual powers they had to go straight to their mortgage lender, to have that amount added to that family's mortgage, and to drive a wrecking ball through their credit score in the process. This is an injustice that cannot be allowed to persist. But for far too many people, it's becoming the norm. There was once a time when local authorities would typically be adopting housing estates when they come forward, but that simply isn't the case anymore. Indeed, a CMA report into this issue last year found that up to 80% of new housing estates now go unadopted, with no end in sight. Indeed, I've got many in my constituency that are unadopted well past a decade after completion. In the meantime, these householders are on the hook for a relationship to a private management company they never expected to be stuck with, for a length of time they never realised or fully appreciated they would be impacted over. And that impact has many facets. Firstly, they're hit with what is in effect a new home stealth tax, forced to pay often hundreds of pounds each year for services that every other homeowner would get as part of their council tax. Now, these bills can typically only be around £350, but in a cost of living crisis, that's still a significant amount. But they're far from limited to that. I've had constituents, I've had correspondence from households that have been hit by bills going into the thousands. And again, often with very short notice for very steep increases. And across the whole country, the CMA found that back in 2022, over £260 million were spent by households on exactly these charges. And in that time, given the growth we know that's happened and needs to continue to happen in our housing supply, that amount will only have grown. That cannot be fair and it cannot be justified. Because part of the issue here is not just the injustice of paying twice for something, it's the fact that this delivery mechanism is structurally designed to maximise the costs that these households bear. Because they're not directly accountable to the homeowners, to the people they're providing a service for, there's no incentive for these management companies to keep bills down. Indeed, I've had correspondents homes who paid charged upwards of £250 just for having one light bulb on their estate changed. Moreover, the small nature of some of these estates, or the extent to which they can be subdivided, means that the bulk of these high fees can often just be covering management or professional services fees and bear no relation to any actual service delivered on the estate. Indeed, in one such estate, it had been subdivided to such a level that the vast majority of the bill that every household was paying as part of every one of those subdivided blocks was simply the fee to have that audited each year. It can't be right. Alongside that, though, it's not just the cost, it's the way in which this is undercutting the very nature of the values of stability and prosperity that home ownership is meant to bring with it. In being on the hook to these management companies, not only do residents often have to fight for years to get bare minimum levels of works done, bare minimum service provided, and bare minimum levels of responses to their queries, they often find that when they look to leave this exploitative relationship, when they look to move, they're unable to do so because of the risks created in that current freehold system. I've spoken to homeowners as sales have fallen through when crucial management pack information hasn't been provided by management companies in a timely way, or who, when they've looked to move, haven't been able to because their credit score has been decimated by the exploited use of rent charges to go after households who hadn't been able to pay steep increases in their service charge in what the management company viewed to be a timely manner. Now, I know and I welcome the government's commitment to trying to do something about this, but it's important that we try and address it at pace. We know that we're going to be, hopefully, building 1.5 million homes over the course of this Parliament, but those 1.5 million homes won't deliver that security, won't deliver that prosperity for the families that take them up if they trap them in freehold relationships and on freehold unadopted estates. Now, my bill looks to take several important steps forward in trying to address this. Firstly, it looks to build on some of the CMA report last year's recommendations to cut off unadopted estates at source, mandating minimum adoptable standards that all developers would have to seek to reach as part of the completion of their works, and then laying out minimum adoption timelines that local authorities would be accountable for delivering to, ensuring that going forwards, an unadopted estate and unadopted estate limbo can finally be a thing of the past. Now, I'm completely aware that, particularly given the perilous state of local authority finances, there will still be some financial burden that this could create. But in giving certainty over the direction of travel in the adoption of estate, in creating clarity about the floor, that minimum standard that these estates would have to be adopted under, it creates the conditions for local authorities to be able to assess, negotiate and condition through the planning process any value they need to extract to ensure that they can cover the cost of the maintenance of that estate going forwards. And hopefully enables us to undercut that inequitous persistence of two tiers of council taxpayers at source. Alongside that, though, it's important that we don't walk by those who are already in these existing estates, particularly as we know that until we have this solution, they're only going to continue to grow in their number, as they are now the default model for housing provision across this country. As a result of that, this bill also looks to build on amendments tabled by the then Shadow Housing Minister in the last Parliament to give freeholders on private estates the ability to enact right to manage, putting them back in the driving seat, giving the power to fire unaccountable management companies to make sure that they have a choice to drive up service levels, to drive up the responsibility and hopefully the performance of those who are undertaking management work. Now, this is far from a panacea. I know for many of those homeowners, they will want to see adoption as the end state for their estate. But it's an important step forward, not just in driving down the ability of management companies to be exploited and extracting unjustifiable levels of fees from new homeowners, but it puts them back in the driving seat to be part of those adoption conversations going forward to hopefully get their estate to where it needs to too, so that the inequity for them can finally be ended. Now, I'm so excited about this government's mission on housing, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm so excited to see the number of people in my constituency across the country whose lives are going to be transformed by our commitment to stable homes. But I know that alongside that, for a very long time now, we failed to appreciate the extent to which freehold becoming a default model for new home delivery in this country is undercutting the very sense of security, the very sense of prosperity that new home ownership is meant to bring. So I hope the government will be acting with the pace that this issue deserves. I'm very excited to be bringing this bill today to start to tackle at source the root causes of the freehold stealth tax that's now affecting thousands of homeowners across the country, paying millions every year in unjustified service charges. And I look forward to working with the government to make sure we can do right by those affected by it right across the country.
Yeah. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Emma Foodie, Abdusam Mohammed, Yuan Yang, Conor Naismith, Amanda Hack, Ben Coleman, Tom Rutland, Callum Anderson, James Frith, Luke Murphy and Sarah Russell.
Alistair Strathern.
Housing Estates Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 13th of June.
Friday the 13th of June.